Commander Jake Morrison had been staring at screens for 12 straight hours when the impossible happened. The Deep Space Monitoring Station on Luna had picked up thousands of signals over the years: space debris, old satellites, cosmic radiation. But this was different. This signal was talking back. The communication room buzzed with activity as technicians scrambled to clean up the transmission. Morrison watched Lieutenant Amy Foster work her magic on the computers, her face growing pale as the signal became clearer. She had been monitoring space for 5 years and had never seen anything like this. "Sir, this is definitely not from any human source," Foster said, her voice shaking slightly. "The signal pattern is completely alien. It's using our own radio frequencies, but the source is way out there in deep space." Morrison leaned closer to the speakers as static filled the room. Then, through the noise, came something that made his blood run cold. A voice. Not human, but trying desperately to speak English with words that sounded like they had been picked up from old TV shows and radio broadcasts. "Hello. Earth people, we watched your signals, learned your words, please help us. The metal ones destroy everything, our people die, children die, we have nowhere to go." The voice broke with what could only be described as sobbing. Morrison had heard plenty of distress calls during his 30 years in the military, but this was different. This wasn't just fear, this was complete desperation from a species facing total extinction. Foster looked up from her console with wide eyes. "Commander, I've traced the signal. It's coming from a star system over 1,000 light-years away. That's impossible unless they have technology we can't even imagine," Morrison finished. He grabbed the red phone that connected directly to Earth's highest military command. "Get me Director Walsh immediately. And connect me to Fleet Admiral Brooks. Tell them it's code black." Within minutes, Morrison was explaining the situation to two of the most powerful people on Earth. Director Walsh ran Earth's defense intelligence, while Admiral Brooks commanded humanity's entire space fleet. Both listened in stunned silence as the alien transmission played again. "They call themselves the Villani," Morrison explained as more fragments of the message came through. "From what we can understand, they're being attacked by something they call harvesters. Mechanical beings that are literally eating their world and turning their people into materials for more war machines." The transmission continued to pour in over the next few hours, painting a picture that got worse with every new detail. The Villani had been a peaceful species, much like humans but more advanced in space travel. They had been exploring nearby star systems when the harvesters arrived without warning. The harvesters weren't just conquering the Villani, they were harvesting them. Every Villani citizen was being processed into raw materials. Their cities were being stripped apart for metal and minerals. Even their children were being fed into massive processing machines that turned organic life into fuel for the harvester fleet. "They've been sending distress calls for weeks," Morrison told the emergency meeting that had assembled in the Luna Station conference room. Top officials had traveled from Earth to hear the situation firsthand. "They've been calling out to anyone who might listen. We're apparently the first species to respond." Admiral Brooks studied the star charts showing the location of the Villani system. It was incredibly far away, well beyond anything humans had ever attempted to reach. "So let me understand this correctly. An alien species we've never met is asking us to travel further than we've ever gone before, to fight an enemy we know nothing about, in a war that has nothing to do with Earth or humanity." Morrison nodded. "That's exactly what they're asking." The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. This wasn't just first contact with alien life, this was first contact with aliens who were dying and begging for help. The moral weight of the situation pressed down on everyone present. Brooks looked around the room at the faces of Earth's top military and political leaders. "They want us to be heroes for complete strangers. They want us to be human," Morrison replied quietly. That simple statement changed everything. For all of human history, people had dreamed about meeting alien life. They had imagined grand diplomatic meetings, exchanges of knowledge, peaceful trade relationships. No one had imagined that first contact would be a desperate plea for help from a dying species. Admiral Brooks stood up slowly, her decision made. If there's one thing humans are good at, it's fighting impossible odds for people who need help. We've done it throughout our entire history on Earth. I don't see why we should stop now just because the people asking for help live on another planet. She turned to her communications officer. Send a message to all fleet commanders. Begin immediate mobilization of all available ships. Tell them we're going on a rescue mission to save a species we've never met from an enemy we've never fought. Morrison watched as the most massive military mobilization in human history began with a simple decision to help strangers in need. Within hours, every available ship in Earth's fleet was being prepared for the longest journey humanity had ever attempted. The aliens had asked for help, and humanity was about to show them what humans did when someone needed saving. Captain Lisa Rodriguez had commanded the battlecruiser Relentless for 3 years, but she had never seen anything like what was happening around Earth right now. From her position in high orbit, she could see the greatest gathering of human military power in the history of the species. Ships were arriving from everywhere, Mars colonies, asteroid mining stations, deep space patrol routes, even the outer rim territories. "Ma'am, I'm getting reports from all sectors," said Commander Tom Bailey, her second-in-command. He had been frantically coordinating with Fleet Command for the past 6 hours as ships continued to pour in. "We've got the entire home defense fleet, both Atlantic and Pacific battle groups, plus everything from the Colonial Defense Forces." Rodriguez shook her head in amazement as another squadron of destroyers took position in the growing formation. "How many ships total, Tom?" Bailey consulted his tablet, scrolling through pages of data that seemed to keep growing. 237 full combat vessels, plus another 150 support ships. That includes cargo haulers, medical ships, repair vessels, and even some mining ships that volunteered to come along. The scope of the mobilization was incredible. Rodriguez watched as massive carrier ships disgorged their fighter squadrons for final equipment checks. Heavy cruisers loaded with enough firepower to level entire cities moved into formation alongside smaller, faster destroyers that could dart between larger ships like attack dogs. But what really amazed Rodriguez were the civilian ships that had volunteered. Mining vessels from the asteroid belt had been hastily fitted with military weapons. Cargo ships had been converted into troop transports. Even some private yachts owned by wealthy citizens had shown up, their owners demanding to be part of humanity's first contact mission. "Captain, look at this," Bailey said, pointing to a ship on the view screen. "That's the Lucky Strike, a ore hauler from the Ceres mining station." The crew retrofitted her with torpedo launchers and asked to join the fleet. They said if aliens need help, then humans should help them. Rodriguez smiled. This was exactly the kind of response she expected from humanity. When someone needed help, humans didn't form committees or spend months debating. They grabbed whatever weapons they could find and rushed to help, regardless of how dangerous it might be. The communication system crackled to life as Admiral Brooks began addressing the assembled fleet. Her voice carried the weight of someone about to make history. "All ship commanders, this is Admiral Brooks. What we're about to do has never been attempted before. We're going to travel further from Earth than any human has ever gone, to help a species we've never met, fight an enemy we know nothing about." Rodriguez listened intently as the Admiral continued. The Villani had been sending increasingly desperate messages as the harvester machines continued their systematic destruction. Entire cities were being processed into raw materials. Millions of aliens were dying while their distress calls echoed unanswered through space. Other species might take months to organize a response like this, Brooks said over the fleet channel. "We organized it in 2 days. Why? Because when someone screams for help, humans come running. That's who we are." The preparation had been frantic but efficient. Weapon systems that had never been tested in real combat were loaded and ready. Soldiers who had only trained for Earth-based conflicts were now preparing to fight mechanical aliens on worlds they couldn't even pronounce. Medical teams were stocking their ships with supplies for treating alien injuries they had never seen. Rodriguez watched her crew make final preparations for the jump to hyperspace. Her weapons officer was calibrating targeting systems for enemies they had only heard described in panicked alien transmissions. Her engineering team was pushing the ship's faster-than-light engines beyond their designed limits to make the incredible journey to Volani space. "Ma'am, all ships report ready for hyperspace jump," Bailey announced. Rodriguez felt the familiar vibration as the Relentless prepared for FTL travel. Around her, hundreds of other ships were doing the same thing, their engines building up the massive energy needed to tear holes in space and travel between the stars. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Brooks announced to the entire fleet, "we are about to become humanity's first ambassadors to alien life. We're going to make first contact by saving them from extinction. Let's show the galaxy what humans do when someone needs help." The stars began to shift and blur as the hyperspace engines engaged. Rodriguez gripped her command chair as reality twisted around them. One by one, the ships of Earth's rescue fleet disappeared into hyperspace, carrying the hopes and determination of an entire species. They were traveling toward a war zone over 1,000 light-years from home, to save aliens they had never met, from enemies they had never fought. Any reasonable military commander would have called it impossible. But Rodriguez knew that humans specialized in doing impossible things when lives were at stake. As the Relentless entered hyperspace, she thought about the Volani families who were dying while their distress calls went unanswered by other alien species. Soon, those aliens would discover that one species had heard their call and responded with everything they had. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humans decided someone needed saving. Major David Kim had seen plenty of war zones during his 15 years in the Marines, but nothing had prepared him for what greeted the human fleet when they dropped out of hyperspace above Volani Prime. The sight hit him like a physical blow to the chest, making him grip the sides of his dropship seat until his knuckles turned white. What should have been a thriving alien world was now a nightmare of destruction. Massive orbital stations that had once housed millions of Volani civilians were now burning chunks of twisted metal, spinning helplessly through space. Some were so badly damaged that Kim could see right through them, their interior levels exposed to the vacuum like broken dollhouses. "Sweet Mother of God," whispered Sergeant Maria Santos from her position at the dropship's gun turret. She had been a Marine for 8 years and had never seen destruction on this scale. How many people lived up there? Through the viewport, Kim could see the planet's surface glowing with an evil orange light. What had once been beautiful Volani cities were now massive industrial processing plants, their mechanical arms and conveyor systems working day and night to strip everything valuable from the world. Smoke and ash filled the atmosphere, turning the sky a sickly brown color. The harvester ships moved through the system like sharks, massive and predatory. They weren't just attacking the Volani, they were methodically consuming everything. Asteroid mining ships the size of cities were breaking down entire moons for raw materials. Smaller vessels herded the few surviving Volani ships like cattle, driving them toward processing stations where they would be turned into scrap metal. Admiral Brooks' voice cut through the shocked silence on the fleet channel. "All ships, you are cleared to engage any target that isn't running away screaming. These mechanical bastards are about to learn why you don't mess with someone under human protection." Kim watched through the tactical displays as the human fleet immediately went into action. There was no hesitation, no committee meetings, no diplomatic negotiations. The moment they saw what the harvesters were doing to innocent civilians, every human ship opened fire with everything they had. Kinetic bombardment platforms that had been designed to destroy asteroids began targeting the massive harvester processing ships. The projectiles, traveling at incredible speeds, punched through the mechanical ship's armor like bullets through paper. Fighter squadrons launched from the human carriers, their pilots whooping with aggressive joy as they dove into swarms of harvester drones. The battlecruiser Relentless and her sister ships formed a battle line that would have impressed naval commanders from Earth's ancient ocean wars. They moved with the precision of a machine, but with the aggressive creativity that only humans possessed. When one ship's weapons overheated, another moved in to cover while the first ship repositioned for a better angle of attack. "This is Admiral Brooks calling any surviving Volani forces," came the broadcast that was sent on all frequencies. We are humans from the planet Earth. We got your distress call and came as fast as we could. Stay where you are, the cavalry has arrived and we're here to clean house. Kim's dropship shuddered as it entered the planet's atmosphere, heading for a Vellani city that was still holding out against the Harvester ground forces. Through the viewport, he got his first clear look at the aliens who had called for help, and the sight made his heart ache with sympathy. The Vellani were beautiful in an otherworldly way. They were tall and slender, with smooth silver skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. Their large eyes were filled with intelligence and deep emotion, currently reflecting the terror and desperation of a people facing extinction. They moved with a natural grace that made them seem almost like living works of art. But right now, they were huddled in groups throughout the city, hiding from the mechanical monsters that were systematically destroying everything they had ever known. Families clutched each other as harvester drones searched building after building, looking for more organic material to process. "Listen up, Marines," Kim announced to his squad as their dropship approached the landing zone. "Take a good look at these people. They sent out a call for help when no one else would answer. They're scared, they're dying, and they're depending on us to save them. That makes them family now." The Marines nodded grimly. Kim had trained these soldiers for years, and he knew they understood what he meant. In human culture, you didn't abandon family. You fought for family. You died for family if necessary. The dropship touched down in what had once been a beautiful city plaza, now scarred by weapons fire and littered with debris from destroyed buildings. As the rear ramp lowered, Kim stepped out and came face to face with the Vellani for the first time. A group of civilian aliens had gathered near the landing site, their large eyes wide with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. They had probably never seen humans before, but somehow they knew these strange new aliens were here to help. An elderly Vellani female approached slowly, her movements careful and dignified despite the chaos around them. She looked at Kim's heavily armed Marines with something he hadn't expected to see: relief. Pure, overwhelming relief that help had finally arrived. Sergeant Santos stepped forward and addressed the Vellani elder with the kind of gentle respect she would show her own grandmother. "Ma'am, we're here to get you and your people out of this mess. We're going to take you somewhere safe, and then we're going to make sure those metal monsters never bother anyone again." The Vellani elder's eyes filled with what Kim realized were tears of gratitude. She spoke in her own musical language, but somehow Kim understood the meaning perfectly. After weeks of unanswered distress calls, someone had finally come to save them. Humanity had just made first contact with alien life, and they had done it by keeping a promise to protect complete strangers. Colonel Mike Harrison had been fighting for his life for 6 straight hours, and things were getting worse by the minute. His Marines were dug into defensive positions around the main evacuation zone, where thousands of Vellani civilians were desperately trying to reach the human transport ships. Every few minutes, another wave of harvester drones would surge forward, their mechanical limbs clicking and whirring as they tried to break through the human lines. Harrison ducked as plasma fire scorched the air above his head, then popped up to return fire with his rifle. The harvester drones were tough, but they weren't invincible. A well-placed shot could take out their optical sensors or disable their weapon systems. The problem was that for every drone the Marines destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. "Colonel, we've got a serious problem," called out Captain Jenny Walsh as she slid into the crater that served as Harrison's command post. Her uniform was torn and bloody from a piece of shrapnel that had grazed her forehead, but she was still fighting with the determination that had made her one of his best officers. "What's the situation, Jenny?" Harrison asked while reloading his weapon. Walsh pointed toward the city center with a shaking hand. "The harvesters just brought up their command unit. It's the size of a city block and it's headed straight for us. Our heaviest weapons barely scratched the paint on that thing." Harrison raised his binoculars and felt his heart sink. The Harvester Command Unit was a mobile fortress, bristling with weapons and protected by armor plating that could probably survive a direct hit from a nuclear weapon. It was grinding its way through the city streets, crushing buildings and vehicles like they were made of paper. Worse yet, Harrison could see that his Marines were running low on ammunition. They had been fighting non-stop since landing, and even their most disciplined fire couldn't make limited supplies last forever. At their current rate of consumption, they would be down to throwing rocks within the hour. "Sir, what are your orders?" Walsh asked, though Harrison could see in her eyes that she already knew what he was thinking. Harrison looked around at his Marines, dirty and exhausted but still holding their positions with the stubborn courage that had made humans famous throughout their own violent history. These soldiers had volunteered to travel across the galaxy to help complete strangers, and they weren't about to give up now. "All units, this is Colonel Harrison," he announced over the tactical radio. "I need everyone to listen carefully because we're about to do something that would make our training instructors very, very angry." The human response to impossible odds had always followed the same pattern throughout history. When faced with superior numbers, better technology, or overwhelming force, humans didn't surrender or retreat. They got creative about dying in ways that hurt the enemy as much as possible. Harrison's combat engineers had been busy during the fighting, placing demolition charges throughout the city according to a plan that would have seemed insane to any reasonable military force. But humans weren't always reasonable, especially when innocent lives were at stake. "Jenny, take your squad and get those civilians to the transport ships," Harrison ordered. "Make sure every last Volani makes it off this rock alive. The rest of us are going to teach our mechanical friends about human urban warfare tactics." Walsh nodded grimly and gathered her Marines for the evacuation escort. She knew what Harrison was planning, and while she didn't like it, she understood why it was necessary. Someone had to buy time for the civilians to escape, and the Marines were the only ones who could do it. Harrison watched as the massive Harvester Command Unit entered the city center, exactly where his engineers had predicted it would go. The machine was following the path of least resistance through the urban landscape, which meant it was heading straight into the most elaborate trap humans had ever constructed. "All engineering teams, this is Harrison. Light them up." The explosion sequence began with the outer ring of charges, bringing down entire city blocks in a carefully choreographed collapse. The debris didn't destroy the Harvester Command Unit, but it channeled the massive machine into a narrow corridor where it couldn't maneuver effectively. As the command unit struggled through the rubble, human snipers emerged from concealed positions throughout the ruins. They had been hiding in basements, sewers, and collapsed buildings, waiting for this moment. Their targets weren't the heavily armored hull, but the sensor clusters, weapon ports, and communication arrays that the machine needed to function. The Harvester Command Unit began firing wildly as its systems were systematically disabled, but the human snipers were already moving to new positions. They had learned long ago that survival in urban combat meant never staying in the same place twice. Meanwhile, in orbit above the planet, Admiral Brooks was coordinating a space battle that was going just as badly as the ground fighting. The Harvester fleet had superior numbers and technology, but the human ships were fighting with a desperate creativity that the mechanical aliens couldn't understand or counter. When the destroyer Braveheart had its engines disabled by Harvester fire, Captain Rodriguez didn't order the crew to abandon ship. Instead, she pointed the damaged vessel directly at a Harvester capital ship and ordered maximum power to the engines. The collision vaporized both ships, but it also created a gap in the enemy formation that allowed 3 human cruisers to break through. Similar scenes were playing out throughout the battle zone as human commanders made decisions that defied all logical military doctrine. Ships with damaged weapons systems rammed enemy vessels. Crews with no chance of survival stayed at their posts to give their comrades a few more seconds to complete their missions. The Harvester fleet had never encountered an enemy that treated suicide tactics as just another item in their tactical playbook. "Admiral Brooks, we're receiving a transmission from the Harvester command ship," reported Commander Bailey from his position at the communications station. "Put it through," Brooks ordered, curious to hear what their mechanical enemies had to say. A cold, emotionless voice filled the bridge of the Relentless. "Humans. Your species is unknown to our databases. Explain your motivation for sacrificing yourselves to protect the Volani." Brooks smiled with the kind of cold satisfaction that had made her one of Earth's most feared military commanders. "Because they called for help, and that's what humans do. We help people who need it. This behavior is illogical, the mechanical voice responded. You gain no resources or territory from this action. Your species will be weakened by these losses. You're wrong about that, Brooks replied. We gain something much more valuable than resources or territory. We gain the knowledge that when someone screamed for help in the darkness of space, humanity heard that call and came running. The mechanical voice was silent for a long moment before responding. We do not understand this concept. That's exactly why you're going to lose this war, Brooks said, and ordered her fleet to resume the attack. 3 weeks after the Battle of Villani Prime ended, Admiral Brooks walked through the streets of what had once been a burning alien city. Now, human construction crews were working side by side with Villani engineers to rebuild everything the harvesters had destroyed. The sight still amazed her, humans and aliens cooperating like they had been friends for years instead of strangers who had met during a war. The harvester fleet had finally retreated after losing more than half their ships to human tactics they couldn't understand or counter. For the first time in months, Villani children were playing in the streets again instead of hiding in underground shelters. Brooks smiled as she watched a group of human marines teaching young Villani how to throw a baseball, while their parents learned how to operate human manufacturing equipment. Admiral Brooks, we need to speak with you, came a voice from behind her. She turned to see Elder Zentai, the senior leader of the Villani people. The tall alien moved with the natural grace of his species, but Brooks could see the exhaustion in his large silver eyes. The war had taken a terrible toll on everyone. What can I do for you, Elder? Brooks asked, falling into step beside the alien leader as they walked toward the temporary command center that had been set up in the city's main plaza. We have received a very interesting transmission, Zentai said carefully. It appears that there are other species in this part of the galaxy. Many other species. They call themselves the Galactic Council. Brooks stopped walking and stared at the Villani elder. You mean there's been a whole galactic civilization out there this entire time? Yes, and apparently they have been watching our situation for quite some time, Zentai replied with what Brooks had learned to recognize as Villani sarcasm. They were very interested to observe how it would be resolved. The transmission from the Galactic Council arrived an hour later, and Brooks listened to it with growing irritation. The message was everything she had expected from a galactic bureaucracy. Lots of fancy words that didn't mean much, formal apologies that didn't sound sincere, and careful explanations about proper diplomatic procedures. Captain Rodriguez, who had been promoted to serve as the fleet's liaison with alien species, read the most important part aloud to the assembled human and Villani leaders. The Galactic Council formally extends an invitation for humanity to join the galactic community in the specialized role of Crisis Response Force. Crisis Response Force, Brooks repeated slowly. They want us to be the galaxy's emergency rescue team. The message uses much more diplomatic language, Elder Zentai offered politely, but yes, that appears to be what they are requesting. Brooks looked out the window at her Marines who were still helping Villani families rebuild their homes. These soldiers had traveled across the galaxy to save complete strangers without asking for anything in return. Now it seemed like other alien species had been watching the whole time, waiting to see if the Villani would survive without lifting a finger to help. Let me get this straight, Brooks said to the Galactic Council representative who had arrived to discuss the offer. The alien was a tall, thin creature with blue skin who had introduced himself as Counselor Vextar. You knew the Villani were being exterminated, but you didn't help because of diplomatic protocols. Vextar shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The Council must consider many factors before authorizing military intervention. There are procedures that must be followed, committees that must approve such actions. How long would those procedures take? Rodriguez asked. Typically, 6 to 8 months for a situation of this complexity, Vextar admitted. Brooks felt her temper rising. The Villani would have been extinct in 6 weeks. Which is why the Council is so impressed with humanity's rapid response capabilities, Vextar said quickly. You mobilized your entire military in less than 3 days and traveled further than any known species to help complete strangers. The offer from the Galactic Council was actually quite generous. Humanity would be given access to advanced alien technology, trade agreements with hundreds of species, and full membership in the galactic community. In exchange, they would serve as the galaxy's rapid response force for humanitarian crises. Basically, when someone needs help and needs it fast, they call us, Brooks summarized. That is a crude but accurate assessment, Vextar agreed. Brooks looked at Elder Zentai, who had been quietly listening to the entire conversation. What do you think? Should we trust these people? The Villani elder considered the question carefully before answering. Admiral, when my people were dying and screaming for help, only one species answered our call. The others watched and waited to see what would happen. I think the galaxy needs more species like humanity and fewer species like the Galactic Council. 6 months later, the human ship Guardian dropped out of hyperspace above another alien world in crisis. This time, the reptilian Saurian people were under attack by crystalline creatures that were draining all the heat from their planet, slowly freezing entire cities. Lieutenant Colonel Kim, recently promoted after the Villani campaign, watched his Marines prepare for another impossible rescue mission. The Saurians had been calling for help for weeks while the Galactic Council debated whether to intervene. Finally, they had done what everyone expected, they called the humans. All right, people, here we go again, Kim announced to his troops as they loaded into dropships. We've got aliens we've never met fighting creatures we don't understand in a war that technically isn't our problem. Sergeant Santos, now a staff sergeant after her heroics on Villani Prime, checked her weapon systems with practiced efficiency. Just another Tuesday in paradise, sir. Kim smiled at his veteran sergeant's response. It had become something of a running joke among the Marines that every impossible alien rescue mission felt like routine work now. Marines, you know the drill, Kim said as the dropships prepared to launch. These people called for help, which means they're family now. And we don't abandon family, no matter how weird they look or how impossible the odds seem. As the human rescue fleet descended toward another alien world in crisis, Kim reflected on how much their role in the galaxy had changed. They hadn't asked to become the universe's emergency response team, but someone needed to answer when civilizations called for help. The galaxy had learned that humans would always come running when someone needed saving, regardless of the distance, the danger, or the cost. It was just what humans did.